Hey there, welcome to the next video in the Bitbucket Blitz video series. In the last video, I showed how to set up pipeline triggers that automatically kick off pipelines in response to events like deployments finishing, builds completing, or pull requests getting merged. In this video, I'm going to show you Agentic Pipelines, which lets you embed AI agents directly in your pipeline steps. You define an agent in your Bitbucket Pipeline.yaml file with a natural language prompt, and it runs non-interactively inside your step container with full access to your repo, your build tools, and Bitbucket's APIs via MCP. So, instead of writing complicated shell scripts to do things like generating release notes, updating documentation, or cleaning up stale feature flags, you can describe the task in plain English, and the agent figures out how to get it done for you. Pipelines are great at the mechanical parts of CI/CD, build, test, and deploy. These are well understood problems, and you can script them reliably. But there's a whole category of work around your pipeline that's harder to automate. Writing release notes from commit history, updating a Confluence page when a deployment finishes, posting a meaningful Slack summary when tests fail, triaging flaky tests, cleaning up stale feature flags. These tasks require context and judgment. You can script them, but you end up with fragile bash scripts that break when things change and nobody wants to maintain. Agentic Pipelines lets you replace that brittle glue code with a natural language prompt that runs inside your pipeline steps. The agent has access to your repo, your build context, and Bitbucket and Atlassian APIs through MCP, so it can read your code, understand what changed, and take action across systems without you wiring up each integration manually. The result is you get automation for the repetitive work surrounding your builds and deployments without maintaining scripts that are harder to bug than the problems they solve. Now, let's jump over to Bitbucket and work through an example. In this demo, I'm going to walk through a golden path pipeline that creates a fully working repository from a template on demand. The pipeline clones a base repo, replaces placeholder tokens with project name, sets up CI/CD, and then registers the service in JSM. Standard template-driven development stuff, there's nothing new here. What is new is the last step. If you provide a link to a Confluence page with a design spec, an agentic step picks it up, reads the page, including any images, and rewrites the app's frontend to match the design, and then it opens a pull request for you to review. So you can go from a designer writing a spec in Confluence to a working MVP in a PR. The template gives you the structure, and the agent gives you the customization. This is something you couldn't add to your pipelines in a practical way with shell scripts and API calls. All right, this is a pretty involved demo, so I'm going to break this into two parts. The first thing I'm going to do is focus on just Agentic Pipelines and show you how to implement that. And then after we're done that, I'm going to dive in and go through kind of an end-to-end demo of something you could do with Agentic Pipelines that I find interesting. So to start with, we're in a repository called Agentic Golden Path in Bitbucket, and we have a Bitbucket Pipeline.yaml file. So if we drill into this, I'm on our Claude branch of this. We're gonna see that we've got a section in here called agents, and we've got spec implementer. This is an agent we're defining. We're gonna say the provider is Claude, and we're gonna give it a prompt. And this prompt can be basically anything you want. So you can just write an entire prompt in Bitbucket now. So this is the first part of Agentic Pipelines, is the ability to add this agents keyword under definitions, and then name your agents and tell them what provider to use. So you can do Claude or RovoDev and provide a prompt. And this prompt, like I say, can be anything. And then to invoke this prompt, we scroll down a little bit further. We're going to find a step called implement spec. And this is the step in the Bitbucket pipeline that's going to actually run that agent. And the condition is not required. This is something we have for demo purposes. Auth is required to let it know what this agent is allowed to do. And then in your script section of your Bitbucket step, you call agent and then the name of the agent. Now, in this case, I'm also sourcing some variables that get passed into this pipeline from a triggering API call. This is not required. So really, to invoke an agent in Bitbucket, you just need this agent spec implementer and the correct authorization. And at the top, under agents, you're going to define your agent by telling it what provider to use and a prompt. So that's all that's required to actually use Agentic Pipelines. It's really straightforward. There's no new fancy YAML, just a couple keywords and then a prompt. And like I say, this prompt can do anything. So in this case, one of the things our prompt tells us to do is use Atlassian MCP to read a Confluence page, understand what's in there, because this agent is going to make changes to source code based on the intent it finds in that Confluence page. So with the teamwork graph and the Atlassian MCP server, you can put information in your Jira tickets, your Confluence pages, and you can have the Bitbucket pipeline parse those, read them, understand it, and take action based on what's in there. So it really allows the products to talk and work closely together. So with that out of the way, we've seen the how. Now I'm going to run an end-to-end demo and show you what this can do. All right, to kick this demo off, we're going to jump over to DX, and I'm going to run a self-service workflow. So this is just something that you can create in DX. And in this case, this self-service workflow is just going to call a Bitbucket API endpoint, and it's going to post some JSON variables to it. So the variables it's looking for is project name, a target repo name, a Jira issue ID, and a Confluence page. We're going to call this cyber calculator because that's what the prompt is going to try and build for us. Now I've got a Jira issue ID set up for this, so we're going to grab that, and we're going to copy it, and we're just going to paste it. And then I've got a Confluence page set up for this. This is a spec that potentially a designer and a product manager collaborated on to describe the look and feel of a particular application. Then we're going to click Run Workflow, and DX is going to invoke the Bitbucket API endpoint and post some JSON to it. Now if we jump back over to that Agentic Golden Path repository we talked about earlier, and we click on Pipelines, now we're going to see that we've got a running pipeline. If we drill into this, we're going to see a whole bunch of steps. So we're going to clone a template repository. This is a repo that's set up with all of the tokenized code that we need. We're going to create a new repository. We're going to clone the new repository, and this is going to have the same name as we passed into that one parameter. Then we're going to copy the templated files from the template repo into the new repository. We're going to do some token replacement. Then we're going to git add, git commit, and git push. We'll create a Jira service management service for this so we can do incident management against it. Then we're going to enable Bitbucket Pipelines in the new repository. And then we're going to check to see if a Confluence URL was populated. So that Confluence URL that I copied and pasted in there, that's an optional parameter. It didn't have to be supplied. If that's not supplied, we won't run step 9. But if it is supplied, we will run step 9. And step 9 is where we implement and run the agentic step that we looked at earlier. So we do a whole bunch of stuff that is traditional template-driven development. We clone repos, we do token replacement, we set up infrastructure, we set up services. And then at the very end here, we're going to use an agent to actually make a bunch of coding changes for us based on a English language written Confluence page that describes the look and feel. So while this runs, let's jump over and take a look at that Confluence page. So if we click over here, the idea here is that a product manager and a designer sat down and they described kind of what this app does and what the visual style should look like. They provided a color sheet, a diagram of the layout, and some background information and some images to kind of inspire the agent when it goes to style this. So when this runs, this spec is going to parse that, understand what's in there, and then it's going to implement those changes. So we're going to wait until this finishes, and then we'll take a look at the new repository we've got. All right, it's done. So if we jump over to Bitbucket and we take a look at all of our repositories, we can now see we have a CyberCalc repository. If we click into this, this will be an exact clone of the templated repository that it started from. The only difference is the tokens have been replaced, and we've made some changes with an agentic pipeline step to the look and feel of this application. If we click into pipelines, we'll see that there's a pipeline running. If we drill into this pipeline, we'll see that we're doing a build step, we're running some tests, we're deploying to our test environment, and we're building and pushing to Bitbucket's Docker repository. Now this icon, in case anybody hasn't seen it, is how to open a child pipeline. If we click on this, we can see we've started a child pipeline. And in this case, we check to see if a Lambda exists. If the Lambda does exist, we're gonna update it. If it doesn't exist, we'd create a new one. So CyberCalc is the name of a Lambda that I created before. So we're just updating it with the new code based on what's in here. If we had picked a completely different name, this check would have failed and we would have created a new Lambda instead. But this code is written once and then it's going to be reused in multiple places. So here we deployed to test. Later, when we merge our PR, we're going to deploy to production. It'll run the exact same YAML steps, but it'll pass different parameters in. So you can start to write steps that are reusable in your Bitbucket pipelines and executing them kind of like function calls. Now, one of the things that the agentic step in our pipeline did is create a pull request for us. So if you click over to pull requests, we can see that it's already got one created. We can drill in, we can approve this. Normally you would dig through this and verify that everything is correct, but we're not going to do that for the demo. We're going to click merge. And once this is complete, we'll see another pipeline kick off for our production deployment. So because we've got template-driven development, we get a fully functioning pipeline ready to go out of the box. I don't have to do any plumbing or setting up anything to get that to work. I just get it for free from the template. And there we go. So now if we take a look at this, we've got kind of the same structure. We've got build, we've got run test, but now we're deploying to production. If we were to look at the Bitbucket pipeline file in this repository, it doesn't have two sets of steps for deploying. It's got one set and it's parameterized, so we pass different parameters in for test and production deployment. So we're going to wait and let this finish, and then we'll take a look at the Docker repository in Bitbucket. All right, let's jump over to another repository. This is the Agentic Package Stores repository. I'm using this one to store all of the packages that are built by this template-driven development process. So if we click on packages, I've got Agentic Package Storage, and if I drill in, I can see I've got a bunch of tags. So Wonk, Wonk2, Wonk3, these were created yesterday. These are other implementations of this. And then I've got CyberCalc implement spec. So this is the one that was done in the test branch. And then we've got CyberCalc latest, which is the one that's the production deployment. So let's delete this tag because we don't care about it too much. What we're going to do is we're going to jump over to my terminal. I'm going to Docker pull this, and then I'm going to Docker run it. The way this app is set up, it's a AWS Lambda calculator that's deployed to US West 2 and US East 1. And then there's a simple Node.js frontend that runs on a web server inside a Docker container. So I can run that Docker container locally and then send invocations to the Lambda to use the calculator functionality. So really simple app, but Agentic Pipelines set it up and styled it for us. So I'm going to jump over to the terminal now, and then we'll carry on from there. All right, so if we do a Docker images, we've got some images here. If we do a Docker ps-a, I don't have any containers running. So the first thing we do is a Docker pull. And we need to change this. It's already got CyberCalc latest set up, so we're just going to do a Docker pull on that. And it worked, which is good. Now we're going to do a Docker run. And CyberCalc latest is already in there, so let's run this. And now we can see that it's spooled up on port 3000. So now we're going to jump over to the browser again, and we'll look at localhost on port 3000. All right, let's jump over to a new tab, and let's go to localhost :3000. And there's our new cyber calculator. So it's been heavily stylized. The button is above the expression input. In the template, this is reversed. The expression input's above the template, or above the button. But because the Confluence page has an image where the button's on top, it actually made some changes for us. And it's got a look and feel that looks kind of like the images we provided and is using the color palette we provided. And every time we invoke this, it's just going to send information up to AWS Lambda and get our results back. So let's try that. Some kind of gibberish statement. And I have a typo, because of course I do. There we go. So yeah, it works. So now let's jump back over to Bitbucket and let's take a look at kind of the overall architecture of this little system, and then we'll talk about the use case in general. All right, so the architecture is fairly simple. We've got a single pipeline set up that does your standard template-driven development thing, clones the template repo, does token replacement, sets up integrations with whatever products you wanted to have, enables pipelines, and gets a basic application bootstrapped and ready to go for your developers. But then, using Bitbucket's new Agentic Pipelines, it reads from a Confluence page that you pass in as a parameter, and it makes changes using RovoDev or Claude. So instead of having a completely vanilla application that barely works and just gives you a starting place, you can build a more complicated template process that can apply changes. You could potentially take multiple Confluence specs or images from Figma or all kinds of other things and pass those into the agent and say, hey, implement this. And then your developers get a more functional, more fully filled out application that they can start building stuff in, as opposed to having to do all the really basic low-level implementations. It just helps everybody move faster and spend more time working on the interesting stuff and less time working on kind of the bootstrapping process. And setting this up is not too complicated. Like I say, Agentic Golden Path is a single Bitbucket Pipeline.yaml file with a single new agent. And again, you add the agent's keyword, you give it a name, you pick a provider, RovoDev or Claude. We're on the mainline branch, so we're looking at RovoDev in this case. Then you just provide a prompt, and then invoking it, you just create a step that has a script that uses the agent keyword to invoke your agent, and you got to set some authorization up, and that's all that it takes. And then you can write this prompt to do anything. So this prompt has been told to read from a Confluence page, understand what the Confluence page wants in terms of styling, and then it tells it to handle it and just make some updates. It also tells it to commit and open a PR. So I didn't have to explicitly write API calls to cut that PR. I just had to tell it to open a single PR after making changes. And I make explicit note to only do one commit and one push and use one PR. You could make any kind of prompt in here you want and have it do a variety of complicated things. That's all possible. Now, if we talk about use cases, say you wanted to provide the ability for your developers to just bootstrap new development quickly. That's an example. That's what this is. If you wanted to have a customer input form where your customers could create a web page or something like that, and the customers wanted to be able to input style guidelines and some basic explanations of the functionality, you could have a place for the customers to upload some documents describing how their app should look, how the page should look, what it should be styled like, and the agents could parse those and make changes to the templated code so that your customer would get something that was much more robust as an MVP, and then they could start to modify it from there via a web interface. There's a lot of ways this can be used. Bitbucket Pipelines has gone from just being simple CI/CD to being a full automation engine that can basically be used to automate anything. So feel free to give it a try. And I'm going to put some QR codes at the end of this demo so you can find some documentation to get you started. All right, thanks for watching. I've got 4 QR codes for you to help you get started. The first one links to a blog post that introduces Agentic Pipelines and covers the key concepts. The second one is a step-by-step guide that walks you through setting up your first Agentic pipeline from scratch, including configuring the provider, writing the prompt, and running it. This third one links to a library of example agents you can copy into your own repos. It covers things like generating release notes, posting Slack notifications, updating Confluence pages, and running security scans. And this last one links to the full Agentic Pipelines documentation, which covers everything from YAML syntax and provider configuration to available MCP tools and how to scope agent permissions with the allow list. With Agentic Pipelines, you're not limited to traditional CI/CD. You can build workflows that reach into Confluence, Slack, Jira, and anything else exposed through MCP, all triggered automatically from your pipeline. If you want a quick win to get started, try adding an Agentic step that generates and publishes release notes to a Confluence page every time a deployment completes. Or set one up that posts a message to your team's Slack channel whenever a build or test step fails, with context about what broke. Check out the QR codes and links in the description and let me know in the comments what you end up building. Thanks for watching.